Last but not least, let me invite Pavel Kabat, the CEO of IIASA and a member of the SDSN Leadership Council. Please.
If you can get, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm starting with a very badly printed slide. As you see, this is a book page, bad print. If you go to shop, probably wouldn't buy it, and I wouldn't buy it either. Unless I would know the book is about something special I really want to read about and understand. So I will buy it, and then go to graphology, that I guess the name of a profession. And then after some time, they spend on it, and after me paying some money to them, they will come back with this, which still will be not a perfectly printed page in the book, but it gives me some words which are very clearly printed. It's about summer, it's about winds and fair, hot, and again summer and shade. I'm trained as a mathematician and meteorologist, so I would say, wow, this is a book about meteorology and climate, right? And I will go again for some money some time, and in the end I will get this, which is a Shakespeare. I am using this cartoon to illustrate how terribly divided, fragmented we are in trying to understand and communicate and advise in the global transitions. We have disciplines which are still living in their own, and actually the interdisciplinarity is getting worse around the world. We have curricula universities which are preventing our young talents to go for the cross-sectoral disciplinary above sciences. We have rooms like that filled with reports and lobbyists going to the New York's discussions in 3 weeks' time, trying to influence the process of SDGs in their own way. And I agree very much with Steve and others who were worried about that process. We have countries which don't think anymore in the transboundary solutions, and we all mean well. I will come to this. One of the attempts to cut across this divide, disciplinary, geopolitical, and science advisory, was establishment of the institute, which I do represent proudly here, International Institute for Applied System Analysis, IIASA, which is set to try system science approach to international science advice and science diplomacy. This is how the world looked like only 50 years ago, actually 45. We had a post-Cuba crisis, looming space wars, competition, oil crisis already at that time, and Berlin Wall was still up and very much dividing us across the world, not only in Berlin. I would use the first word, which I will be using later when I conclude, a vision and courage. It was a vision of former President of the United States, Lyndon Johnson, who said, why don't we try science, science diplomacy, science advice, to bridge over the divide. And he approached Soviet Union at that time, and Soviet leadership was enthusiastic about proposal, and negotiation took 4 years until 1972. At Royal Society in London, IIASA was established by 12 founding countries. United States, still the largest supporter and client of IIASA, Soviet Union, Japan. The remaining 9 came half from the left of, if you say, the east part of the world, and half of the countries from 9 came from the western part of the world. We had both Germanists at that time, and that's the reason why IIASA became non-governmental, important for my conclusions. Vision non-governmental. Sometimes they call us quasi-governmental, in a way that we are independent but still having access to the highest level of the governments around the world. At present, IIASA is hosted in this fantastic facility, which hopes to invite you all to see us. It's a gift of the Austrian government, Bruno Kreisky at the time, yet another visionary to use yet another dimension in the science and interaction with the policy, which is a culture and passion. At present, IIASA has 22 member countries, major economies of the world, represented by the top academia, governments, and funding in the organization, which is out there to set independent assessments and independent advice to the major processes in the global transitions. It is independent, I will come to it in a minute, since being non-governmental. It is interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary. It is focused on both major transitions and the local and regional implications. And it has both, sometimes I call it two legs. It must be cutting-edge international science, measured by the international standards of the scientific enterprise, which means publishing, publishing, publishing. And it is also right leg, which is the science policy interface at its highest level, and through whole chain of the science policy process. About 300 researchers in-house in this beautiful council from more than 50 countries, but more importantly, 4,000 alumni around the world, among them leading personalities from academia and policy and governments. For example, John Holdren, current chief of the OSTP, is IIASA alumni. So is Angela Merkel, who spent 6 months from her DDR postdoc time at IIASA. And I can go like that, show you some of the personalities being there, being exposed to this IIASA policy, science policy discussion and dialogue. 300 institutions around the world formalize collaborations, which means we are networked too, and about 2,000 researchers every year on contract from more than 65 countries doing the science policy research and advice. It is strictly inter and transdisciplinary. Home is offered to natural scientists, engineers, social scientists, mathematicians and others, and including, for example, theologists. Interdisciplinarity, in my view, is one of the preconditions for a successful and effective science to policy international advice. As Mark Wolpert yesterday put up, it is operating from the perspective of looking into the linked systems, out of the silos. When we talk about advice about water, don't forget about implications for the food and energy and climate and poverty equity. System science. I think this is novelty which needs to be remembered anytime we approach the most powerful in this world deciding about global transitions. The progress is not in these silo solutions anymore. Go back to my initial cartoon. So what are the key parameters of the international science advice, the way how we try to promote it in collaboration with many? Interdisciplinary integrated. It must be international. I mean, the trust which major international bodies puts into the advice depends very much how the advice is carried by international community. We have seen this, for example, in the IPCC process, of course, which is most successful of those examples we were talking about. Independent governmental bodies, national reports are usually less used or even misused by the policymaking compared to independent ones. There is an example, Arctic Council came to IIASA. Arctic Council, which has been established to discuss the joint solution for the Arctic, telling us we have enough research in our countries and in our observers' countries, but we don't have an independent vision, independent plausible future of the Arctic. Would you do that? Would you provide platform in Vienna, Luxembourg for such a research? It must be solution-oriented and top science at the same time. It must be long-term. It must be about trade-offs and core benefits between different elements of the advice. Again, if you do effective international advice, it has to be based initially in the top-level science. And this is, of course, the indice of this institution I'm leading. Just some citations, statistics in the top 10 journals in the field. I talk about top 10, including Science, Nature, PNAS, and others. You should be able to offer yourself for all the parameters and indices to be measured how good you are. This is the Age Index, which is being used currently to evaluate all universities and all groups in the science world. Two examples of the way how effective international advice through this institution worked. One is coming from the recent, already 2 years ago, initiative of the former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, who realized that the climate agenda, climate discussion, climate policy probably is, should be approached from different corners, should be approached from a transdisciplinary approach, air quality, climate, synergy. And we have done such a support. It was a publication in Science by more than 28 authors internationally, which shown the core benefits between the air quality and climate policies. And based on that core benefits, the so-called Coalition of Climate and Clean Air was established, which currently has 33 member countries, 40 international organizations, and we have a scientific committee led by IIASA scientists. The other example is really exemplary for this discussion. It's about energy. In 2006, UN system came to IIASA with a question, could you do an independent global energy outlook with goals around energy access? Currently 2 billion people around the world still don't have it. Question, can we double the rate of efficiency by 2050? And can we double share of renewables? And we have taken initiative with 300 colleagues around the world to produce such an outlook. But we said to Secretary General at the beginning, energy, this is more than energy, this is also climate. About 80% of the emissions in the climate comes from the energy sector. So we said we do such a scenarios, but we also do it synergetically, in a system way, for the climate target of 2-degree maximum warming. As Jackie put eloquently, energy and emissions is also connected to the air quality. And we said, why don't we have a sector number 3 part of this portfolio, which is the air quality, which is the target of keeping the air quality parameters within the threshold in the major urbanized cities and regions in the world. And health. Jackie said almost 4 million people every year dying because of the PM2.5, PM10. We said, why don't we have a health sector as a core benefit and lowering this number of people in this scenario factor 10. So you've got 4 different sectors, 4 different policies, 4 different ministers in every country we talk about, having their own budgets, and we said, let's compare the cost. Now this is the outcome. In the percentage of the global GDP, about 90 trillion, when you do the energy security only, you need about 0.2%. When you do the air quality control around the world and health, you need about 0.6%. Climate will cost you about 1%. Altogether, you are about 2% of the global cost. Now look at what happens when you do this in the systemic way from the beginning. These numbers are 40% lower. These numbers have been presented to everyone in the system, from Secretary General all the way down to the ministers and about half of the UN Assembly about SDGs, yet we are still discussing the objectives and the goals in the very sectoral, non-nexus sense. It was mentioned a couple of times that the science policy advice should not be scientists on one side and others on the other side. It should be about new partnerships. It should be about a full chain of collaboration between academia, governments, businesses, civil society, and arts. And I think this is what we are forgetting. We are still fighting for ourselves, for our own scientific portfolio to be visible. I think we should do, as Carlos put it, very new approach, not being afraid. You can be talking to President Barroso, as Angelo is doing all the time, and publishing in Science next day. It's combinable, believe me. It's not a dirty part of your job. So we need to invest into this new type of partnerships. I think this is, to me, the most important conditions for the scientific advice and for the success. I'm concluding with this. Many of you said it. Next 18 months, not next 18 years, will be fundamental in the international agenda in terms of adopting development goals, going to Paris next December and having financing summit in Addis Ababa in July. Science advice to these processes is fragmented, disciplinary, sectoral. Science to policy feedbacks, especially in the SDG process, is weakened every day by diplomats negotiating for their own country's least committal outcome. This is the reality. And I think if something can happen after this meeting, IIASA will help. We should be very strong, not next 10 years, next 18 months, to be able to have our voice heard in the very transdisciplinary integrated way to stop this process, because I think that there is a still big lag between the effectiveness of what we can do and the actual impact we are having. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.